Hello, this is Ruban Selvanayagam and welcome to another Property Solvers podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be able to speak with Jason Patterson, the short Lease Flat Mentor. How are you doing today, Jason?
Yeah, good, thanks. Thanks for the invite.
Good, yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah,
Leasehold property sellers with short leases often reach out to us here at Property Solvers, and we have a half decent amount of experience, both positive and negative, of dealing with such scenarios. But I've always found that every case appears to have different characteristics and nuances, which is why it's great to speak with you today. So perhaps we can start with the basics, and you can give me a little bit of background and how you started working in this particular area.
yeah. So with basically, I started my property journey in 2001. I couldn't afford to buy houses, so I thought, you know what, I'm gonna start in the property game. I'm starting with flats. So this was in North London because houses were quite expensive where we were or where I am. And then I said, you know what, if I'm gonna start, I'm starting to buy flats. So my first flat I bought was in 2001 for 70,000. Had a lease of about 83, 84 years at the moment. And then after that, basically someone told me the following year or later on that year that, oh, don't let the lease fall below 80 years. I said, why? Because that's the marriage value. So anything below 80 years, the flat starts to diminish in value. So I was like, oh, okay. So the following year, which was 2001, I contacted the freeholder and asked them for a lease extension, which was a voluntary lease extension. And then from then, that was my first ever lease extension that I did. That was about, 22, 23 years ago now. And then from then, that was my first experience in terms of buying flats with basically leasehold flats. And then moving forward, fast forward maybe 10 years or so, during the credit crunch, 2007 to 2009, obviously I had quite a few with TMW, not TMW actually, BM Solutions.
Yeah.
And what happened is, they said to me, right, after the credit crunch, they changed their criteria in terms of how many buy-to-lets you can have with them. So I had about eight or nine of them. I said 2008, 2009-ish. They said, right, those 8, you can stay with us, yeah, but you can't release any equity. So I said, all right. So I made a decision to say, you know what, I'm going to move 4 of them from BM over to TMW. Now, when I move those 4 across, 3 of them were fine, and the 4th one had a lease of 72 years. So the surveyor said to me, it was from Connells, said, look, this particular one is below 80 years, close to 70, and TMW won't really like it, so they won't release any more funds like you have for the first 3. So what you should do and can do is go to the freeholder, ask them for a lease extension, and after that, go back to TMW, and they should release the other 30 grand for you. So I said, all right then. So what I done, I contacted the freeholder using the voluntary method. I wrote a letter asking them for a lease extension quote, and then they came back with, oh yeah, I also put in there, will you be willing to sell me the freehold, a little cheeky. When they came back with, yeah, we're willing to sell you a freehold, and also here is a lease extension quote as well.
Right.
So what we did, we bought the freehold. Yeah. So section 10, we have to inform all the other leaseholders that the freehold may or may not change hands, and if they want to, they have to come in with you or can come in with you. So the top floor flat came in with me, and we bought the freehold for I think 17,000 plus fees and plus costs, and then we own the freehold. And after that,
to a share freehold, essentially.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And it was extended our lease to 999 afterwards. And from then, went back to TMW, said, yeah, I've extended my lease, and then they released the other 30 grand. So from then, I said, you know what, I'm going to start to look for flats with short leases only, and then just move forward from there.
Right. So when you were initially buying these properties back in 2007, that kind of period, were your solicitors not kind of giving you some kind of warning with regards to the 80-year period coming up? Were they not kind of giving you an indication that that could be a risk particularly when it comes to lending? Because I know it's probably unfair to say those properties are unmortgageable, but it's going to make it very challenging, So with the solicitors not giving you like some kind of proceed with caution,
In 2001, you say?
when you were first buying these properties, they were approaching that 80-year kind of deadline?
Not the first one. The first one from 2001. Not that I can remember. The legal team didn't mention the 80-year rule or the marriage value to me. That's only afterward, but someone mentioned it to me in 2002. That's when I thought, okay, I'm aware of it now.
Right.
And moving forward, for all the ones that I bought, all flats I moved forward, basically, I was aware of it after that, yeah.
Right. Okay. That's interesting because it's something that should be raised as a red flag, really, you know. But I guess it's worked in your favor. It's been a bit of a blessing in disguise because it's meant that you've learned a lot about the kind of ins and outs of this particular part of the industry. And you would probably look at properties that you know, a lot of people wouldn't, you know, which is great. So you mentioned that it's 80 years and under. What's your approach? I mean, how do you kind of, if you see a property that, you know, is coming close to the 80 years or may even be under 80 years, what's your approach? I mean, do you think to yourself, okay, how are you going to value it? How are you going to kind of think to yourself, okay, well, what is a good price to pay for this property? You know, how do you, what's your kind of general look and view when you approach
Yeah,
it?
so it depends. It's like case by case, as you mentioned earlier. So just for argument's sake, I try and buy around 65-ish% or below the current market value. So just for argument's sake, say the end value of a good lease is 100 grand, just to keep it simple. I look to buy it at 65 grand or below because the aim is to make a minimum of about 20% uplift after like stem a lease and do any refurb and or reconfiguration. Yeah. So just for argument's sake again, say I bought it like 60% below market value, which is 60 grand, then about 20 grand margin there up to 80 has to include the lease extension, any little refurbs that I'm doing, any reconfiguration. And then the top part, which is 80 to 100, has to be my profit before tax.
Right.
So that's the way that I look at it generally moving forward. So if it needs a refurb and reconfiguration and it's got a short lease, them ones are called a triple threat. And the triple threats you can get for or try and buy for a lot lower than a 65-60% ratio.
Right. Okay. Okay. So would it all depend on, you know, the seller's situation as well? So the seller's obviously going to want to maximize the price that they achieve, which is completely fair. They would probably have an idea of what the lease extension cost is, but what I've always seen and what we see here at Property Solvers is it tends to vary depending on the property, depending on the freeholder. I know there are these leasehold extension calculators out there, but we tend not to rely on them because often when we look into things a little bit more, there's complete discrepancy. So how do you approach it if you don't necessarily know what the lease extension cost is going to be?
Yeah, so I've got two main routes. The first one is contacting my lease extension surveyor. He's been doing it for 30 odd years. So any property you see, I say, yeah, look, Andrew, I've seen this short lease flat I'm thinking of purchasing. Here are all the details, the end of the lease length, the address, current value, potential end value. And when he comes back with a quote to see how much it will cost, obviously, to extend the lease. And then the other comparison what I do is by contacting the freeholder directly, whether it's by auction or by an open market. And then I say about 90% of the time, they're willing to allow you to, they give you like a little quote, how much they think it will be to extend the lease, but I compare the two. So number one, directly to the freeholder for a quote. And number two, go to a lease extension surveyor. And then those two, you can get accurate answers for your figures moving forward.
And is the freeholder obliged to give you that information, or is it just a kind of, look, I'm thinking about buying this? I mean, it's in their best interest that the property gets sold because otherwise it could end up, you know, in a situation, you know. So are they obliged to kind of give you that information, or is it more like kind of buttering up a little bit?
Yeah, not all the time. I've had some where they're refusing to do it because you're not the actual vendor.
Right.
So if that's the case, I'll ask the vendor to send this letter by email on my behalf.
Okay.
Yeah. And then they'll come back to the vendor, and the vendor will come back to me.
Right. Okay.
And
so
then there's other times as well, actually. So one thing.
yeah, sorry.
Times I've been on viewings with the agent and the vendors there, And then like the one from recent, and I've asked the vendor, oh, do you have any idea of how much it cost to extend the lease? And then they said, oh, wait a minute. Went to the top drawer in the kitchen, pulled out the document, said, yeah, I wrote to the freeholder recently. It's going to cost me 18,000 to extend the lease. It's too much for me. This is what I'm selling. So there's sometimes it's best to ask at the actual viewing, because sometimes the vendor will have them details right there, and that's the reason why they're selling.
Okay. So moving on to the kind of actual transaction process. So say, for example, a seller approaches you, the lease is approaching 80 years, you've done your investigations. How do you then ensure that you limit your risk when you're actually purchasing these properties that are close to that period? I mean, obviously, you will be taking over the responsibilities of the lease, and you need to make sure that all your ducks are in a row. So can you talk me through the process that you go through generally? I know there's things like the Section 42 and all that. Could you kind of run through that?
Yeah, so again, it varies, but I can give you one example or two examples.
Sure.
Yeah, so this on open market, and I want to guarantee that some of the figures. So number one, I'll ask the vendor to serve a Section 42 notice on my behalf, and then that will be sent obviously over to the freeholder, and I'll ask my legal team to serve it on the vendor's behalf. So when
So
we
just to interrupt there, so what is a Section 42? Do you mind giving us a little bit of a breakdown of what that is?
Yeah, so Section 42 is the formal way and the legal way, should I say, of extending your lease by 90 years with peppercorn ground rent, which means zero ground rent. So you must have owned the property for at least 2 years in order to serve a Section 42 notice. And the freeholder cannot refuse you a lease extension once the Section 42 has been served. And then with a Section 42, you have 6 months to agree a premium figure. After this point, if there's no premium figure that's been agreed, then the case can go to a tribunal, and then the judge will decide based on the surveyor's reports what the price you should be paying for your lease extension to be, or if you're buying a freehold, what it should be.
Right. And is that basis on the base of finding one of those leasehold valuation surveyors that you mentioned? It would be based on that figure that they will
Right.
provide. Right. Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you were giving an example there. I interrupted. Apologies.
Yeah, so right. So yeah, basically a vendor will serve a Section 40 notice on your behalf, and then it's assigned to yourself when you get the keys. Yeah, and then you finish up the process to obviously extend the lease. So going forward, basically, obviously, I go and view it. I see what needs to be done in terms of any refurbs or reconfiguration. Put that down as part of my figures. On the Section 42 notice, based on my surveyor's report, that's what it should be. Put that down as well. And then I work backwards in terms of what offer price I give the vendor based on me earning or making a minimum of about 20 uplift after I extend the lease. So that's in a nutshell. The other version I can do, like the one I mentioned where the vendor has an £18,000 voluntary method letter in the top drawer in the kitchen. That method, basically I've done a simultaneous purchase and lease extension, because I estimated, because I know the area, I estimated about 20 grand to extend my lease for that one. But on the letter, it had 18,000 and some change. So you know what? I'm not going to negotiate with the freeholder. I'm going to accept that particular offer, because it's more or less rounded to what I was thinking. So that one, I've done a simultaneous purchase and lease extension. And then when I got the keys, I had a new lease on completion. So all I had to do was just sort out the refurb part of it and then rent it out. So it depends on different scenarios and the type of property. And if you're buying from auction, i.e. post-auction or pre-auction, sometimes the Section 40 notice may not be valid as well. But it depends on how long it's been there, because it's valid for like 3 months. So it depends.
Right.
But that's two examples.
Yeah, so it's worth checking the contents of the legal pack with the solicitor, right, just to make sure that the Section 42 is completely valid. And then once you've issued that effectively bypasses this 2-year rule of ownership, and then you can effectively acquire the property and then apply for the lease extension directly with the freeholder. Do you find that there's kind of different variations in terms of, I guess with yourself, if you're doing buy to let, you've got a bit of time on your hand to kind of negotiate and figure things out. But if you're like planning to, refurbish the property and sell it on, it's a different question. So do you find that there's different time periods depending on the freeholder that you're dealing with, and do some tend to be quicker than others? Because that's what we've seen. Some of the freeholders that you're dealing with are pretty much non-existent. You're trying to get hold of them and it's pretty impossible. So yeah, have you found that, and how have you kind of found your way around that particular issue?
Yeah, there's a few. That's the shortest one I've done is 3 months, which is obviously during the conveyancing process. And the longest one has been 9 months.
Oh
Some
right, okay.
freehold, yeah, are difficult, and some like are forthcoming in terms of their responses and replies, etc., etc. Some live in other countries as well, so it depends. And then nowadays, I think if they live in another country, you need a special form to be signed in order for them to be able to allow you to extend the lease in this country, even though it's their flat.
Right.
So look out for that one as well. But yeah, some of them are forthcoming and some of them aren't. So in terms of the ones that are not forthcoming, I get my surveyor to do my negotiations on my behalf, because he knows quite a few of the freeholders, been doing it for like 30 plus years. So a lot of the freeholders, he knows like inside out, and then they'll respond to him rather than my solicitor.
Yeah, that's a good way into it, because if he's got a direct line of communication, that would definitely help.
Yeah.
It's definitely a good person to have on your team for sure. Okay, so how if you're, say for example, put yourself in the shoes of a seller who's got a short lease property, what kind of would you have any kind of suggestions for them, or like recommendations of what they can do to position themselves in the best possible way to sell their property and optimize the price?
Yeah, if, for example, they do have the money and the flat is a short lease, then it's going to diminish in value by a good amount, depending on how much the lease length is. But if possible, to get the maximum price, I would maybe do a lease extension prior to completion. So that way you can get the maximum value for your property. And then what you can do is, when you're selling the property, you use the proceeds of the sale to pay for the lease extension. And in that way, you have the maximum value if you're a seller.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one route you can do. I've seen that happen before. But a lot of the time, only maybe owner occupiers will be buying them ones rather than investors, because there's no profit in it after that.
Yeah.
But if you're one that can't or doesn't know about that method, then there's not much you can do really. You can put it on for a bit higher than the normal like short lease rate. I mean, hope that an owner occupier buys it, or someone that doesn't know what they're doing buys it. But in general, a lot of the time, you're meant to knock off that lease tension rough figure, and then a little bit more for a person's inconvenience of extending the lease going forward.
Yeah. I guess these days, a lot of solicitors will be flagging up a short lease pretty much, early in the process. So, a lot of buyers are gonna, I think to themselves, okay, well, I'm definitely not going to buy this. It's a serious red flag that's often raised, during that process. And from a buyer's perspective, I know you do a lot of buy to let. How are you finding the lending market? I mean, and how do you work that into the transaction process? Because I would imagine a lot of lenders are going to say to you, okay, well, this, as you mentioned with TMW before, they kind of say, okay, we're not going to deal with a short lease. Do you get lending on the basis of implementing the Section 42 process, and then perhaps refinancing afterwards, or do you take out bridging loans? How do you generally do it?
Yeah, so a lot of the ones I've done both, but a lot of the ones that I use are mortgages, and the lender, or before COVID, and before 2022, before the interest rates started rising with Liz Truss, a lot of the lenders, if a lease was above 50 years, they allowed you to purchase a flat and then extend the lease at a later date.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, a lot of the lenders, not all of them, but some of them say to you, right, we'll allow you to get a mortgage on it as long as the lease is not below 50 years at the end of the mortgage term. So with that, I was buying and then extending the lease afterwards sometimes using either the Section 42 or the voluntary method. But now, as the market's a bit more rocky, interest rates are a bit higher, a lot of the lenders, as in mortgage lenders, want you to purchase and extend the lease simultaneously. You've got a new lease on completion. There's only a handful that will allow you to get mortgages without extending it beforehand.
Right.
Now, also, if a lease is below 50 years, then what you can do, again, is use bridging finance. And with bridging, the lenders want you to extend the lease before the end of the bridge. Or the lender will say to you, you've got to serve a Section 42 notice in between exchange and completion. Yeah, or use a hybrid product. And a hybrid product is whereby the lender will lend on the property and the lend on the lease extension, and then they'll give you got to put down between 25 and 35% deposit. So basically, they're lending on the end value. They've included everything in that. Yeah, so that's that form. Or you can use crowdfunding, which is another. Another route is lease option agreements. You can take JV with someone. So it depends on what the lease is and the type of property it is as well.
Yeah. So you got to kind of assess the risk of each particular transaction and say, okay, what's the likelihood of this, of my ability to extend the lease, and what's the time frame as well? Because I guess you don't want to be stuck in a hefty bridging contract, which
Exactly.
which will build up your costs and really affect your margins. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on, I wanted to talk about the Leasehold and Freehold Reform Act 2024, which kind of became law early this year in May. But from my understanding, the provisions are yet to come into force. Perhaps you can start by giving a little bit of a summary of what that is, what this new act is and what it actually means for people who've got short lease properties, and whether they should be holding back and just waiting for it all to play out, or perhaps let's start with a bit of a summary, and then we'll kind of stem out from there.
Yeah. So on the 24th of May, 2024, Michael Gove pushed through the updated Leasehold Reform Act. Yep. So you got a royal assent on that day, and then after that, now it just needs to be implemented. On my Instagram, actually, and on my LinkedIn, I put a post up yesterday relating to the new housing minister. So a lot of people have said it will take about a year and a half or so to be pushed through, or for it to be implemented. But the housing minister came out 2-3 days ago, I think it was the 30th of October.
Right.
And then he said that it will take up to 5 years in order for it to be implemented.
Wow.
So that put some people on the back burner now. So, but what I'm going to do is go through the things that will affect the method, basically, or the strategy. So number one, as it stands, you can extend your lease by 90 years with peppercorn ground rent using the Section 42 method. Number two, you can extend your lease by 90 years. Yeah. But now, with a new rule, you can extend it to 990 peppercorn ground rent rather than 90 years. So like a virtual freehold. Yeah. That's number one. Number two, with a Section 42, you have to wait 2 years or own the property for 2 years before you can extend the lease or apply to extend the lease, and the freeholder cannot reject it. With a new rule, you don't have to wait 2 years. So you can buy the property and then extend the lease from day one to 990 rather than wait 2 years.
Freeholders obliged to do that as well. The freeholder can't say, well, I don't want to do that.
Can't say no.
Accept. Right.
From day one rather than wait 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the third one, which is important, is the marriage value, the abolishment of the marriage value. So normally the freeholder gets a bonus when you extend the lease. So just for argument's sake, say it costs you 50 grand to extend the lease in the current market. When they abolish the marriage value, that will come down to a bit over 60%, 65% of the current value. So instead of you paying 50 grand to extend the lease now, half it, it's about 25. So it might cost you 30, 35 grand to extend the lease rather than 50 grand to extend the lease because the marriage value has been abolished. But they're going to adjust the deferment rate and the capitalization rate in order to compensate some freeholders for the loss of the marriage value. Yeah, so those three are the important things that will benefit or help short lease property strategists in that sense. But what's happened is, again, on my LinkedIn that I put recently, some of the billionaires like Guy Hans are taking the government to court based on this new Leasehold Reform Act, because with his one, he says that I think he said that his stock will go down by close to $1 billion in terms of valuations.
Yeah.
Because of this new rule. So he's gone to the High Court to try and get this stopped or amended or changed. And then there's probably a few other high net worth individuals, ultra high net worth individuals.
And there would be, especially kind of London property owners, you know,
Exactly,
legacy portfolio owners kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly. They're pushing for it to go through, well, not to go through, should I say. So that's one of the reasons why as well, I reckon they're delaying it for another 5 years or so, because some of these court cases take years and years and years.
Right.
So that's another reason. The other one, yeah, both are the main ones in relation to what it is in terms of my strategy that I do. But if it does go through, it'll be beneficial for me and short leases because we'll make more profit from it moving forward.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess it works a lot more for people that own short lease properties because they don't really have to worry about losing a lot of that marriage value. You know, so I think it's definitely going to work. But I didn't realize it was that slow in the making, and things weren't moving forward. So basically, these court cases have got to happen before anything can be enacted, and I guess it's got to go through the Lords as well. Is that right? Before, yeah. So okay, so in terms of kind of
so one thing actually, Labour said that they want to amend it. So there's one pushing through Michael Gove's rules, and then Labour wanted to amend it because the government section is not fair. So basically, what they wanted to do was cap or ban leasehold properties and cap or ban ground rent. So Labour, because they're more of a socialist, obviously party, they wanted to push that through again. So that will again affect the actual freeholders. So if they're going to amend it as well as wait another 5 years until these court cases are finished, they might even be in power in 5 years' time.
right, yeah.
So the Conservatives might come in again, and then it might be delayed even more. It's like, who knows?
It could all end up going back to square one, right?
Yeah. So if you got any short leases, I'd just do it as you work, because it could take another, like I said, 5, 6, 7 years for it to be pushed through.
Yeah, I mean, this discussion has been going on for some years anyway. You know, even since around the kind of COVID time, there was discussion about it, and I think things seem to be not really progressing at all by the sounds of things. So really, you know, it's not really for sellers if they're thinking about just kind of waiting for all of this to play out. It's, at this point in time, it's probably not really gonna, you know, benefit them to kind of sit back on their hands and wait for this to all play out. It's going to be too difficult. Okay, that's interesting. So, in terms of your own business, Jason, how are you kind of scaling it? I mean, are you looking at, you know, how are you kind of moving forward with this? Are you just out there looking for short lease property sellers? And how are you moving forward with your own strategy?
Yeah, generally, I look, resources that I use are like Rightmove, a local agent, because I've been using them for like 17, 18 years. They just send me a WhatsApp message 3-4 weeks before and say, yeah, Jason, we've got a new instruction coming on in 3 weeks' time. It's just giving you the heads up. So when it's live or before it goes live, come in there, view it. If you like it, it's yours. If not, we'll put it on an open market. So that pipeline is still there. I've also got 1 or 2 contacts with the councils and housing associations, because I've got some tenants with them. And what happens is some of the landlords are selling based on the tax situation, Section 24, and the higher interest rates. and some of the landlords have social housing tenants in them. Now, the lenders say that a corporation wants to actually keep and retain the tenants. So what they're doing, they're contacting people like myself and say, oh, look, landlord's selling. Will you be interested in buying this short lease flat? So sometimes we're getting them direct from the councils or housing associations as well, based on the landlord wanting to sell and then retaining the tenant, because the housing stock for the local councils is and our waiting list is dire. Yeah. So they want to retain the tenant. So that's a nice little source as well.
Right.
Also got links with Property Filter.
Okay.
Yeah, so they've got loads of short leases on there as well. And
Yeah.
analysis like Gilliam and stuff.
Yeah.
I've done a talk with Paul Davies from Nimbus Maps.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, PPN in Milton Keynes. And then I went first with my presentation. And then he went second. And then I didn't know I was going to do it, but he pulled up all of the short leases in Milton Keynes, all of them on the screen, done a little presentation on it. And then he brought up all of them for the entire country.
Yeah. So then you can do some direct to vendor approaches and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great.
So
Okay.
there's a lot of options out there.
Yeah, for sure. And what would you say are the best resources for people to keep abreast of what's happening in this particular sector? You know, to see what's going on with the new act, the Leasehold and Freehold Reform Act, and just kind of keep abreast of what's going on. Where do you typically go?
There's multiple sources. Yeah, multiple sources. I've got an app on my phone. I think it's called Uday. Is it Uday? I think it's on my phone. Maybe just send me all the latest property news all the time. Right. Look at the Financial Times, the Telegraph, the Guardian. I've also got, and I'm in quite a few WhatsApp groups. I mean, in the WhatsApp groups, people are always sharing information about the latest news, etc. And I put it on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. So basically, it's just those are the main routes, really. I go to a lot of networking events as well. And again, sometimes I'm speaking, sometimes I'm listening. But yeah, you get to pick up information that way as well.
That's great. That's great. And how can people find out more about what you do? I know you do quite a bit of speaking, as you just mentioned. How can people find out and more about your work and you know what you do in the space?
Yeah, mainly I advertise on the socials now. I've been on social about 3 years anyway, on Instagram anyway. Yeah, so Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm on TikTok, but I don't really use it that much.
Okay.
Normally I post my next speaking engagement or I'll be on there, and then individuals can obviously attend if they want to. I'm also updating my page at the moment, my Jason Patterson page. So if anyone wants to do any courses or one-to-one lessons or mentoring, they can also access me there. But I can contact me via the socials, like Jason Patterson 365. I'm available there. Just send me a DM if you're interested in anything like that for speaking engagements or up-to-date news on short leases, etc.
Brilliant. I'll add all of that in the show notes for sure. So yeah, really interesting conversation, Jason. Appreciate your time. It doesn't. I mean, I thought that change was happening a lot sooner than it actually is by the sounds of things. But it's good to kind of keep up to date with what's happening in this particular area, because it's definitely an interesting strategy to be approaching. And for sellers as well, I would say it's worth keeping an eye on the legislation, but appreciating that it's a lot slower than what you may think. But yeah, as Jason mentioned, it's worth kind of keeping in touch with your freeholder and always keeping an eye on what your lease term is, so you don't actually end up having to potentially face these high costs. So thanks a lot for your time, Jason. Really appreciate it. And let's keep in touch.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks for the invite.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot. Bye.